What if the fairy godmother had helped Anastasia instead of Cinderella? What if the life she had dreamed of, one free of royal duties and expectations, could have been a reality? The night of the ball had arrived, but for Anastasia it was just another day filled with burdens she never asked for. Let's explore what could have happened if things went differently. The night of the ball was here, and Anastasia felt the weight of her mother's expectations pressing down on her. Her mother had worked tirelessly to ensure she and her sister were ready to meet the prince. Anastasia, however, didn't share her mother's enthusiasm. She had never longed for the royal life, the endless orders, and the duties that never seemed to end. The idea of being forced into a life she didn't want filled her with dread. As the clock ticked closer to the time they were meant to leave, Anastasia stepped outside into the garden. The fresh night air felt like a brief escape from the pressure. She wasn't sure if she even wanted to go to the ball. She didn't care about the prince or the palace. She just wanted peace, freedom from a life of constant duty, a life where she could live for herself and not for anyone else. Just as Anastasia pondered her future, the air shimmers around her, and with a gentle poof, the fairy godmother appeared. "Anastasia," she said, her voice warm and soothing. "I see the burden you carry, but tonight you have a choice." The fairy godmother smiled, her eyes twinkling. "I can offer you a chance to live the life you've always dreamed of. A quiet, simple life, free from the expectations that weigh you down." With a flick of her wand, the fairy godmother cast her magic. Instead of going to the grand ball, Anastasia found herself walking through the local village. The streets were filled with lively townspeople enjoying a small celebration, a stark contrast to the stiff, formal ball at the palace. People were laughing, talking, and enjoying the simple pleasures of life. This was what Anastasia had always longed for, a chance to be free from expectations. As she wandered through the village, Anastasia accidentally bumped into a young man carrying a basket of flowers. He quickly apologized, his voice soft and sincere. "No harm done," she said with a smile, her eyes meeting his for the first time. His name was Elijah, a quiet florist who had lived in the village for years. They struck up a conversation, and before they knew it, hours had passed. The two were drawn to each other, finding comfort in the simplicity of their talk. Anastasia hadn't felt this alive in years. They spent the rest of the evening together, walking around the village, laughing and discovering the world beyond the palace. Anastasia marveled at how ordinary life could feel so extraordinary. The villagers were kind, welcoming, and content in ways she had never seen before. She found herself laughing freely with Elijah, enjoying his company more than she ever thought possible. As the clock tower struck midnight, Anastasia's heart raced. "I have to go," she said to Elijah, a sense of panic creeping into her voice. She had to be home before her mother returned. But even as she hurried back toward her house, part of her didn't want to leave. The night had been perfect, and Elijah felt like someone she could finally share her dreams with. Anastasia quietly slipped back into the house, her heart heavy with the knowledge that her mother would soon be home. She knew what was expected of her: to marry a rich prince, to fulfill the life her mother had planned. It wasn't the life she wanted, but what choice did she have? Over the next few weeks, Anastasia's secret meetings with Elijah continued. With each passing day, she felt more and more certain that this was the life she wanted. She dreamt of running a small flower shop with Elijah, living a quiet, peaceful life without her mother's constant interference. One day, as Anastasia was tending to the shop with Elijah, word spread that the prince was going from door to door, searching for the mysterious girl he had danced with at the ball. Anastasia's heart sank. She knew this moment would come eventually, but she wasn't ready. The prince would be looking for her, but she didn't want the life he represented. She didn't want to be part of a grand royal marriage, surrounded by duties and expectations that she had no desire for. Her mother, however, was more focused on Cinderella and her own plan to get her daughters married to wealthy men. While the prince knocked on doors looking for his dance partner, Anastasia snuck out of the house unnoticed. She couldn't bear the thought of being part of another royal affair. She was determined to stay with Elijah, to live her life the way she chose. With the help of the fairy godmother's magic, Anastasia was free. She had her own life now, one that didn't involve her mother's control or the prince's pressure. She and Elijah ran the flower shop in the heart of the village, a place that her mother would never think to visit. Here, Anastasia could finally live for herself, away from the expectations of royalty and the rigid demands of her upbringing. Each day felt like a small victory. Anastasia found joy in the simplest of tasks, arranging flowers, tending to the shop, and spending time with Elijah. The stress of royal life, the constant pressure to conform to societal expectations, was all but a distant memory now. In its place was a life that felt true to her, one where she could make her own choices and live authentically. Meanwhile, her mother was beginning to notice that Anastasia had disappeared from her life. She had no idea where her daughter had gone, nor did she care much about it until the prince's search began. But when she walked through the village one day, she came across the flower shop and saw Anastasia and Elijah working together. A look of confusion crossed her face, realizing that her daughter had chosen a different path, one outside of her control. One afternoon, as Anastasia and Elijah were working in the shop, the prince arrived in the village. He had been looking for the girl he danced with at the ball, and he had finally come to the right place. Anastasia's heart raced as she saw him approaching the shop. She didn't want to see him, didn't want to get swept back into a life she had rejected. The prince walked into the shop looking directly at Anastasia. His eyes were filled with recognition, but also with hope. "I've been looking for you," he said softly. "The girl I danced with at the ball. Will you come with me?" But Anastasia's heart had already made its choice. She looked at Elijah, her life now set in this quiet village, and she shook her head. "I appreciate your offer, Your Highness, but this is where I belong now." As the prince left, heartbroken, the fairy godmother appeared once more. She smiled at Anastasia and Elijah, pleased with the young woman's choice. "You've found your path, Anastasia," she said, her voice full of warmth. "I'm proud of you. You've chosen to live for yourself, and that's a gift no prince can give you." And with that, she disappeared, her magic having fulfilled its purpose. From that day forward, Anastasia and Elijah continued to run the flower shop, creating a life full of love and simplicity. No longer was she a prisoner to her mother's plans or the prince's expectations. She had found the peace she had always wanted, living a life true to herself. And so, Anastasia's story became one of choosing her own path, of finding happiness in the simple joys of life. But what do you think? Could this have been the story that was meant to be? If you enjoyed this alternate version, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Fairy Tale HQ for more. Until next time, remember, you have the power to shape your own destiny.